Every conflict has a spark, but this one has many. And a history that refuses to stay in the past. The United States and Venezuela, two nations that once shook hands, now glare at each other across a political battlefield. For decades, they were friends, partners, energy allies. And then, almost overnight, everything collapsed. What happened? Who changed? And why does this rivalry still shape global politics? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the most misunderstood conflicts in the world. This isn't just about oil, or politics, or sanctions. It's about a nation fighting for identity, caught between the world's greatest superpower and its own internal chaos. This is the real story of USA versus Venezuela. Chapter 1. The Good Old Days. Let's rewind to a time people rarely talk about. A time when the US and Venezuela weren't rivals, they were partners. Deep partners. For decades, Venezuela was the #1 supplier of oil to the United States. If you drove a car in the 80s or 90s, chances are that engine was burning Venezuelan crude. American oil companies operated freely on Venezuelan soil. They drilled, they exported, they made billions. And Venezuela, stable, democratic, and wealthy, benefited too. During the Cold War, Venezuela was an island of stability. No military dictators, no major civil wars. Just oil money, democracy, and a comfortable relationship with Washington. It was a honeymoon phase. But honeymoons don't last forever. And this one ended with the arrival of a man who would change everything. Chapter 2. Hugo Chavez. A former soldier, a failed coup leader, a charismatic firebrand, Hugo Chavez steps into Venezuelan politics like a storm. He doesn't whisper his ideas, he shouts them. He doesn't try to please Washington, he confronts it. And the people? They love him. Because Venezuela, despite its oil wealth, was drowning in inequality. A tiny elite lived like royalty, while millions struggled to survive. Chavez promised to flip the script. He vowed to crush corruption, return oil profits to the poor, break free from U.S. economic dominance, and build a Bolivarian revolution across Latin America. To the poor, Chavez was a savior. To the elite, he was a threat. To Washington, he was a nightmare waiting to happen. Why? Because Chavez didn't just talk about anti-imperialism, he openly insulted the U.S.
Señoras, señores, desde esta misma tribuna, el señor presidente de los Estados Unidos, a quien yo llamo el diablo,
forged alliances with Cuba and used oil money to support leftist movements across the continent. For Washington, this wasn't just politics. This was a direct challenge to U.S. influence in Latin America, a region America believed was firmly within its sphere. The stage was set for confrontation, and in 2002, it arrived. Chapter 3. The Coup That Changed Everything. April 2002. A political explosion. Protests erupt. Opposition groups seize momentum. Military officers defect. Business leaders take charge. And suddenly, Hugo Chavez is taken from office. For 2 days, 2 long, chaotic days, Venezuela is under new leadership. And Washington's reaction? Immediate applause. White House officials publicly welcome the restoration of democracy. News channels describe it as a victory.
The Bush administration made it clear it is happy with the change in leadership in the country responsible for 15% of America's oil imports. Anthony Mason has our report.
Markets surge. Then, just as fast as it began, it collapses. Chavez returns, triumphant, defiant, and furious. He blames one nation by name. The United States orchestrated this. Washington denies it. But evidence whispers another story. U.S. officials met with coup organizers. Funding flowed to opposition groups. Intelligence reports showed awareness of the plan. The U.S. celebrated Chavez's brief removal. Whether America pulled the trigger or not, the damage was done. The trust was over, forever. Chapter 4. Oil, the real battlefield. Let's talk about the power behind all the politics. Oil. Not just some oil, the largest proven reserves of oil on the entire planet. More than Saudi Arabia, more than Iraq, more than Iran. If the world runs on oil, Venezuela should be one of the wealthiest nations on earth. And Chavez knows that. He nationalizes oil operations, raises taxes, tells U.S. companies, play by our rules or leave. He uses oil wealth to fund massive social programs. He builds homes, funds literacy campaigns, subsidizes food, exports cheap oil to Cuba and other allies. To Washington, this is a dangerous move. Venezuela isn't just selling oil, it's weaponizing it. A new anti-U.S. coalition is forming, funded by Venezuelan crude. The U.S. sees a threat. Chavez sees independence. And the world sees two titans heading toward collision. Chapter 5. Maduro takes over. Chavez dies, and his hand-picked successor, Nicolas Maduro, a former bus driver and union leader, takes the wheel. But Maduro doesn't inherit a functioning machine. He inherits a nation on the edge. Oil prices crash hard, and in an oil-dependent economy, that's catastrophic. Production falls, inflation skyrockets, corruption eats through government institutions, shelves go empty, hospitals crumble, millions flee, crossing into Colombia, Brazil, and eventually the United States. It becomes one of the largest migrations in modern history. The U.S. says Maduro is a dictator destroying his country. Maduro says the U.S. is sabotaging Venezuela with sanctions. And honestly, both sides have fingerprints on the crisis. Chapter 6. Sanctions, the modern war. When the U.S. wants to pressure a government today, it doesn't send troops, it sends sanctions. And Venezuela gets hit with some of the harshest sanctions in modern U.S. history. First, individuals, then banks, then oil exports, then the state-owned oil giant, PDVSA, the heart of Venezuela's entire economy. Overnight, Venezuela loses access to global markets. Oil sales collapse, revenue disappears, and the country spirals deeper into economic freefall. The U.S. says sanctions are aimed at the government, but ordinary Venezuelans, families, workers, children, feel the consequences most. Food becomes scarce, medicine becomes expensive, power outages spread. To Washington, sanctions are leverage. To Venezuelans, they are suffocating. This is economic warfare, silent but devastating. Chapter 7. Guaido versus Maduro. A moment straight out of political drama. Juan Guaido, an opposition leader, declares himself the interim president of Venezuela, and in less than 24 hours, the United States, Canada, Europe, and many Latin American nations recognize him. Suddenly, Venezuela has two leaders, two governments, two realities. Internationally, half the world says Maduro is a dictator. The other half says Guaido is a puppet. Domestically, millions support Maduro. Millions support Guaido. And millions are simply tired. Venezuela becomes the center of a geopolitical tug-of-war. Chapter 8. The Global Chessboard. This conflict doesn't stay between the US and Venezuela. It expands globally. Russia steps in. Military advisors, loans, weapons. A clear message to Washington: we're here. China invests billions. Oil for loans deals, infrastructure, a long-term strategy. Iran sends tankers filled with fuel, breaking US sanctions in broad daylight. A bold move that shocks the world. Suddenly, Venezuela becomes more than a nation in crisis. It becomes a strategic platform for America's biggest rivals, right in its backyard. This isn't just a regional conflict anymore. It's a global contest. Chapter 9. The Present. Today, the US-Venezuela conflict continues because Venezuela demands sanctions relief. The US demands free elections. Russia and Iran strengthen Maduro. Oil politics remains central to global markets. Migration pressures grow every year. Human rights issues remain unresolved. Negotiations happen, deals are announced, but the deeper issues still untouched. Trust is broken, and rebuilding it is a long road. Chapter 10. The Real Reasons. When you strip away the speeches, the headlines, the politics, it comes down to four forces. Oil, who controls it and who benefits. Ideology, socialism versus capitalism. Empire versus independence. Geopolitics, Russia, China, Iran versus the United States. Domestic politics. Leaders on both sides use this conflict to strengthen their base. This isn't a simple rivalry. It's a multi-layered power struggle, fueled by history, pride, and the world's most powerful natural resource. At the center of all this, people, families, millions who just want stability. Venezuelans struggling through crisis. Americans wondering why their country is involved. A hemisphere watching closely. Because oil, power, and geopolitics don't just shape nations, they shape lives. Will the US and Venezuela ever find real peace? Or is this conflict destined to stretch into the future, shaping elections, alliances, and global energy markets? Only time will decide. Thanks for watching. Stay informed, stay aware.